For joining us here today. My name is Joe Guinan, and I'm the president of the Democracy Collaborative. For those of you who don't know us, we're a think-do tank based in Washington, D.C. and Cleveland, Ohio, dedicated to building community wealth and the next system of political economy here in the United States and around the world. I'm very pleased to welcome you to today's conversation on Indigenous worldviews and the next system. I'm particularly excited for today's conversation because too often we talk about the next system or the new economy. We talk as if we're seeking to build something that has to be created anew, when in fact a big part of what's needed is actually the rediscovery of knowledge and practices that we used to have but have subsequently lost. And that includes pre- and non-capitalist social and economic forms that center life and nature and well-being and our relationship with Mother Earth. And a great and important source for that thinking has been here with us all along in the Indigenous worldview of those whom our system has most marginalized and displaced and sought to eradicate in the name of progress. And so this webinar for us is about our debt to and attempt to rediscover the essentials of that worldview as part of what we all collectively need for the future. At TDC, we've been having this Next System conversation for a number of years. And back in 2015, we launched the Next System project as a big part of how we've sought to grapple with these existential questions. More recently, we've relaunched the conversation through what we've been calling our Next System Movement Lab, which is a process of webinars and in-person gatherings. And today's conversation is part of that process and a recognition by TDC that whatever is to come next must learn from and include the wisdom of the Indigenous worldview in creating some new balances with each other, with the past, with the planet that nourishes us, in the knowledge that we need to rediscover some ancestors in order to build what comes next and to be better ancestors ourselves as we pass on our only planet to the generations to come. We're recording this conversation and we're going to be distributing it publicly after the event through all our usual channels for those who aren't able to be with us in real time. So just wanted to make you all aware of that. And we've got a truly fantastic panel for this discussion, and I want to quickly introduce them now, although we hope there's space for them to introduce themselves more fully as part of the conversation. We're delighted to have initially Freida Jacques, Turtle Clan mother of the Onondaga Nation, and a voice on the practices and teachings of the good mind and about the Onondaga Nation's values pertaining to protecting the natural world. Also joining us is Jeff Corntassel of the Cherokee Nation, professor of Indigenous Studies at the University of Victoria, whose focus is on the intersections among Indigenous internationalism, community resurgence, climate change, gender, and community well-being. We also have Miki'ala Catalfano of Hawai'i, co-director of Native Roots Network, which serves as a hub for community members to come together to build a better world through youth leadership development, cultural exchanges, traditional and contemporary Native arts, ceremonial run delegations, and community wellness projects. And Miki'ala has been an active participant in our Next System Movement Lab throughout, so delighted to have her here again. And last, but most definitely not least, we have Stephanie Gutierrez of the Oglala Sioux tribe of South Dakota. When we were thinking about who could best moderate the discussion today, we turned immediately to Stephanie, who's had a long-standing and significant association with the Democracy Collaborative through our past Learning Action Lab on community wealth building in Indian country, which we held a number of years ago. Stephanie's been a major influence on the organization's thinking on indigeneity and economic and system change, and she was the author of our 2018 publication, An Indigenous Approach to Community Wealth Building, a Lakota translation, which really explores how a systemic approach to inclusive local economic development needs a process of active translation to resonate with the traditional values at the core of Native communities. So we're in very good hands today with Stephanie and with our panel as we seek to learn and explore what it means to have an Indigenous worldview on political economic system change and what comes next. So with that, Stephanie, over to you and to the panel. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Joe. So pleased to be here. I'm calling in from New Haven, Missouri, which is about an hour and 15 minutes outside of St. Louis. I'm on Osage land, and I'm really happy to be here. I've been part of, like Joe said, the community wealth building work, which we have since created a curriculum and a training on Indigenous community wealth building under a nonprofit called Seven Fires. So we are working with a community this summer, the Navajo town site in Navajo, New Mexico. So more information hopefully to come out of that. But I'm really happy to be here with these wonderful speakers and just grateful for all their knowledge and their wisdom that they're bringing forth in this space. And so I like to just start with one, let's take a deep breath so that we can all get comfortable. It's like we're all in our living room, one living room together, and just want everybody to feel comfortable and yourself so that we can have a really good discussion. So I like to say, take a deep breath, breathe in on the count of 4, hold for 2, breathe out on 4. So let's do that really quickly so we can just bring our souls and ourselves into this space. So I'm going to start now. Ready? Hold for 2 and breathe out for 4. We'll do 2 more. And 1 more. We all come from backgrounds of coming into space together. We do that differently. And I think breathing is one that we all know universally. So I hope that helps to ground us. The first question that we're going to start with is I think this question, how can we live differently? I think we're really looking at where we're at right now in our economy, in our politics, in our social well-being. And for those of you who, for the speakers on here, I want you to really let us know what it means to live Indigenous, but also to live Indigenous within the world we have today, bringing that past forward. So who would like to go first in answering that question? How can we live differently? Freida? Please.
So what we're taught is every people on earth were given the same rules when it came to using the resources on Mother Earth. And I'll go through them. One is when you go get resources, and let's just use berries for an example. So we go out and we go find the berries, okay? We never use the first or even the second bush because you're preserving. That's an act of preservation. Then on the third bush, you give that thanks. So you thank it. We all have different ways to give thanks, and we can give thanks that the berries are offering themselves still. And then we only take what we need. And lastly, the rule is only take what's given. So if you use these rules in your daily life, you will cause a whole lot less damage than if you didn't use them or have no knowledge about it. So if you want to think about what caused a great deal of damage on Mother Earth, a lot of it is we've taken stuff that wasn't really available. if you've got to drill a mile down to get something, or take a whole mountaintop off, this is not given. And then, of course, those are fuel that release the methane, or not methane, but release the CO2 that caused a great deal of damage. So those rules were, not followed for a very long time. And especially in Europe, many of those rules were pushed aside. And so by the time they came to the Americas, they had no idea about them. And it's unfortunate because those rules really help keep damage from happening.
Thank you, Freida.
You're welcome.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Sure, I'll jump in. What for getting us started, Freida. Thanks for the good words. And yeah, I come back to a Cherokee word. So I'm from Cherokee Nation and dance at the Ochota grounds in Tahlequah, Oklahoma. And I come back to a Cherokee word, dohi. And dohi means peacefulness or stillness, but it also means living according to the pace of nature. And so really, and I guess it depends on who we are in the question, who are the we, if we're talking about Indigenous nations, I think we're talking about collectively, if we're thinking about living differently, I think it's going back to those roots, but also living according to nature's timeline instead of an artificial timeline. We were just talking about planting before everyone got on, and thinking about how we have strawberries available in winter and all of these different things. It kind of almost dovetails with what Freida was saying. We're taking more than we need, and we're also hoarding food. And so I think living differently is not just producing more food, it's actually producing the foods that are necessary for our sustenance, right? So really strengthening Indigenous food systems and local Indigenous food systems. And so I'm biased, like probably everyone on the panel, in the sense that I think to live differently, we really need to support Indigenous self-determination. It's no accident that 80% of the world's biodiversity is on Indigenous lands and waters. And so we protect those lands and waters for future generations. So thinking about how to live differently, also means honoring Indigenous knowledge systems and Indigenous knowledge holders, so that our future generations are going to thrive. So that's kind of how I come at that question. How do we live differently? I think it's, for Indigenous peoples, it's living with a sense of abundance, and going beyond kind of sometimes the narrow constraints of that word sustainable. Sustainable almost suggests like we're just going to barely meet the threshold requirements to survive. And I think we have to think from an abundance perspective. And that's, I think, what a lot of Cherokees, have been thinking from that standpoint for generations. And that's how we've not only survived, but thrived for over 10,000 years. So
Yeah, beautiful examples, Jeff and Freida. And you mentioned, native agricultural practices. I think we're really seeing a huge push and return to regenerative agriculture and the way that we grew and planted. And your example, Freida, was beautiful. And there is more of that happening. And we need more visibility in those areas. We need to highlight not just Indigenous nonprofits and, philanthropy and stuff. We need everyone to highlight those practices, because those are traditional practices, often using contemporary models or contemporary products and design, but the idea is to go back to that original cultural perspective of, like you said, Freida, taking our time, thinking, slowing down the process. You know, it's time and it's energy. Miki'ala, what tell us a little bit more at Native Roots and how what you're doing there, how this applies or how it shows up. I know there's a lot going on with your organization, so feel free.
Well, thank you. And I want to say that, you know, listening to both Freida and Jeff, the word that came to mind for me is relationship, you know, that relationship with those plants as you're gathering, the relationship that you have with the other people that you are doing your work with. That's like really the key as far as how, as a Native Hawaiian, we conduct ourselves in the world. And I think that earlier someone was talking about returning to what we knew. And I've heard and talked to folks who they put a K in front of the new. It's not new. We knew this, and I didn't come up with that, so I want to make that clear. but it applies that we knew these things, and we won't apply them in the same way now that we did back in the day. But that propensity for us as Indigenous people to take actual new with the end knowledge and apply that in ways using the idea and the respect for relationship, the respect for all of life on the planet and for each other. And I will say too, like the respect for ourselves and the relationship we have with ourselves. And we have to do that work as well so that we can come in with 100% of ourselves to do the work healed, because we have situations that we've survived as communities. And so that's also part of our responsibility. And that would be the other word that comes to mind. And how can we live differently? And thinking in terms of our responsibility, not just to the individualistic, capitalistic ways that we look at taking care of whatever business we need to take care of to live in the world, in our communities, but also, you know, that responsibility to really our sacred contracts with our ancestors. So those are some of the things that come to mind, especially listening to other folks on the panel. And thank you.
Thank you. You know, in thinking about your idea of how this all does go back to relationships, and I'm certain that each of you can agree that it's relationship not just with the living, but our ancestors as well, and then those to come. And it really makes me think about how we include them. They're always a part of the conversation, as well as all living things. And I wonder too, this really, I think you moved us into sort of this next question, which I often, and I'm wondering if you agree, we often start conversations when we're going to plan or prepare or create. We often start with our values. And it's hard not to really hone in. And I know for my tribe, we have you know, some major values that we have to align with. And so I'm curious, you know, what are the values that we should be considering? What we each have our tribal values, but you know, what are the other values that should underpin the next system that will help us all heal and live well? Give that some thought. And if anybody has some that are like jumping out that need to be heard, share them, please.
So what comes to mind is the fact that our role as human beings on Mother Earth is to be thankful. So we as Haudenosaunee were given the Thanksgiving address, which is the English word for the Gunahanyu, which is Thanksgiving to all those parts of creation. First of all, to all the people on earth, and then it goes up from, you know, the grasses, the medicines, the water, the bird life, the trees, all the way up to our grandmother, the moon and the sun and all of them. So this is a basic part of who we are, is to be thankful. And it's a directive that that is what we do as human beings. We need to give thanks. And all our peoples were given ways to express that Thanksgiving, and ours happens to be that Thanksgiving address. If you look on YouTube, you can find it all over. So that's one of the first things. Now, in order to express Thanksgiving to the parts of creation, it develops respect and love and caring for those parts. And I believe those are the values that just are not there most of the time. The fact that people can go in and wipe out the amazing rainforest in South America without even thought about what's there, or they don't even know what's all there. And that is happening, and why? For money. So this idea of seeking out money no matter what is like, that's the true imbalance of what's going on in the world today. So I'll leave that there. And I'd like to go back to little ideas about the electric times coming. So I'll leave that for later.
Thank you. I'm excited. I can't wait to hear about that. Who else? What else are you thinking along the ideas of values and this next system's idea of as a whole, you know, as collectively, still honoring our own individual tribal values, but even our family values, our community values?
Sure. I just figured that we'd take turns, and we probably will be covering a lot of our shared values. So I got two. Okay. So one of the things that always is top of mind for me, and I think that in Hawaii we call it kako, and kako is the Hawaiian word for all of us, and it really is something like thinking in terms of doing things collectively, and the fact that, you know, for us, we're responsibility based, our responsibility to family, the land, each other. Whereas, you know, if you look at United States and, you know, capitalistic values, those are individual rights based values. And so that thinking in terms of we versus I is a very, very strong value that helps guide what we do.
All excellent points. It's hard to follow up on these two. I'll go to a Cherokee word again, gadugi, which means you know, that no one person is left alone to struggle in life. And so this idea that we help each other out. And I think that goes beyond just Cherokee Nation. It goes beyond our individual communities. We help each other out. So if I see someone, you know, in a struggle, I don't just pass by. I'm not a bystander. I have to help them out. That's part of our governance. And so really those values are you know, need to be embedded in our everyday lives, and not just spoken about, you know, at certain times of the year, or just happen when you're at ceremony. And so I think another important value for you know, across different communities is generosity. And it kind of ties into gadugi, you know, I think the extent of our wealth is really the extent of our generosity. You know, the more generous we are, the wealthier we are in that sense. And so we're very generous people to a point, you know, except when we're being disrespected, or when we're not being honored in the way, you know, those relationships need to be honored. I could go on all day about this. I think kinship is another, you know, I was thinking is as you both were speaking, kinship undergirds so much of that. And kinship kind of beyond, I think we really need to get beyond this notion of the nuclear family, which is a really artificial notion of family, right? To really think about our extended families, and our extended kin include animal nations, plant nations, right? The land and the water. So really getting beyond kind of a narrow conception of what family is, which I think those are colonial ideas that have been imposed on us, and we need to strike back at them. And I think the last thing I'll share is really this notion of fire. And for Cherokees, the fire is at kind of the center of our governance, Aniajila. And but the intermediary between Cherokees and Unetlana, the creator, are women. And so really coming back to, our clan mothers have always been the seat of our governance. And we've been matrifocal societies for generations, but we've shifted over time to more patriarchal society, at least in Cherokee Nation. And so really coming back to our roots in terms of honoring those clan mothers and honoring those clans that are at the seat of our system of governance. So
It's wonderful. Thank you so much. There's so much in that, everything that you've all said. I mean, I'm imagining and picturing all the colors and the shapes and the ideas that come from kinship and respect, gratitude. I'm wondering if there are examples that you have seen or have witnessed or have recreated in your communities, examples of how those values show up. So one thought I had was when we were doing the translation of the community wealth building and understanding it from a Lakota lens. One example for us was inclusion, meaning, and I think this gets at the idea of individual versus we, employing the unemployable. It means making sure that we're all taken care of, that when we say systems change, there are systems that need to change in order to get to these values, to be able to represent them. So when we say everyone, it should be included, that means the unemployable. And what are we doing about that? How are we allowing that? Even within our own tribal governments, are there policies and codes that are in place to say, on our lands and among our people, we value them. We recognize that we all make mistakes, and what are our employment practices? So that's one idea of how to get back to that value. I'm wondering if there's other examples of that. And Jeff, I love your idea of, reclaiming what family means. Are there examples of that you have seen in communities, even in the way government laws and such are set up? Is there wording that's changed to speak to that, especially with, our nation building work? Anyone have something they want to add to give an example for people? I could see your wheels spinning.
Yeah, I think, I was just thinking more about what you said, Jeff, about, as far as values, we think in terms of like equity, and leaving nobody behind. And we run a weekly walk run. It started actually as a youth media team combination running tradition type of situation for the youth. And then the adults were like, well, hey, what about us? So it turned from just running to a run walk. But no matter who shows up every week, we make sure that nobody's left behind. As a principle, that nobody is going to be left in the dark. And if we have 2 runners and just 1 walker, then we all walk and we all do that together. And part of that is that we, in that case, we're centering the walkers. But when it comes to different things, as you mentioned, folks who have been incarcerated or some of that, we really treat all of our community members as the human beings who they are, who have value. And we recognize that some folks have been dealt cards, as we know, in the system that have led them down pathways that aren't healthy for themselves and for others sometimes, but that nobody is throwawayable, and that that's not how we roll. We try to, as you said, Jeff, we lift people up and we meet them where they are. And one particular example that comes to mind, I'll try not to cry because it always makes me cry. I don't know why. But we run periodic art exhibitions. We call them Our Story. And it's Native people telling the story of Native people versus encountering the fact that often our stories have been told by others. And so here we are, we're in this place, and there's always food. And all the, some of the folks who organize with us, like, really, there's always going to be food? Yeah, there's always going to be food, and everybody can come in. And I remember this particular artist, El Frank Manriquez, she had done this beautiful video short. And we had a headset there, and people could put it on, and they could look at all the different things that are on the walls. And this man experiencing homelessness came in, and I could tell he was a vet. And he came in, and he was looking at us like, is it cool for me to be here? We're like, yeah, there's food. So there he went, and he was eating, and then he was checking out the art, and he put on the headset, and here is this man, and he's reacting to this very wonderful video, but he's sobbing and he's crying. We recognize his humanity. He had every right to be there. We fed him, and he was respected. And that's the kind of thing that we see in our community, that he didn't expect to be respected, but he was respected. So that's an example I would give.
Good example.
It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Freida?
Yeah, so those values of respect, and that's not only the natural world, but it's for humans. It makes a big difference if people feel respected, if they are included. One of the things in our own traditional way is we don't divide the young people from the old people. We don't have the teenagers go over here or the toddlers go over there. We're all there. When we have a big social dance, you got somebody who's 80, you got somebody who's 45, you got somebody who's 26, and you've got a couple little kids, and then you go on. So this lineup of dancers is the whole village. The village is dancing. And so we try to keep that going. And I think it's an important aspect of who we are, that we don't divide people up. The kids learn because they're doing it. They're trying, and nobody has to give them lessons about whatever. They watch the others and they jump in and try. So that is good. I think I want to bring up one of the aspects of our way, and that is to include when you make a decision, to include the generations ahead. Often you hear it as the 7th generation. Will they have what we have today? If we do this, will our place still be here? Will we still have water? Will we still have all that we need from Mother Earth if we do this today? So that's very compelling in terms of making decisions if we consider that generation ahead. So, okay, I'll be quiet for now.
No. We love hearing from you. Thank you.
Love it.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Okay.
Yeah, I love what I'm hearing and really enjoy what you both have shared. And I think the best example I could think of is really our stomp grounds. And we call them stomp grounds, but they're really the seat of our governance or tribal towns. And everyone's welcome there. So, we host these, and we only have 3 active stomp grounds now. We used to have, at the time of colonization, we had about 55. And so removal and all these things have done a number on our ceremony, but everyone's welcome there. And that's where, I was thinking as Freida was talking about we don't distinguish between age. I mean, you could have a 10-year-old leading the dance, just like you could have a 95-year-old leading the dance, and it doesn't matter. Like that's part of it. And we host neighboring nations, from a lot of Creek folks, Muskogee will come to those dances. And it's really that's a place of inclusion and really honoring that fire that I spoke of earlier. So yeah, for me, that's really where we really need to perpetuate that. And those are the examples. And then we have a seed project as well, where we share, everyone from our nation can get 3 different types of seeds each year. And so even if you're living outside of the territory like I am, you can grow some of your own foods, or it's not enough to sustain you or to keep you going, but it's enough to make that connection. And so I usually get tobacco. Might get you can get rattlesnake beans, you can get all sorts of different varieties of corn, but really to keep that connection strong. And I can think of other ways, or I can think of that as another way to really connect people back to their territory, but also to really understand what it means to nurture and respect those plant relations.
You make me think, Jeff, about I believe it's the Chickasaw Nation who, there's so many statistics out there about how many natives live on reservations versus urban areas. And there's a lot of myths around that too. I like to say, especially for us, we're nomadic. We live in rural and urban spaces. We go between, our families are all over. We move constantly and we stay with different people. And so you can't put a hard line on those population data, especially US Census. And there's a lot of reasons for that, we all know. But the Chickasaw Nation they want to include tribal members who no longer live on the land, on the reservation lands. They want their voice to be heard. And so they allow voting by regions. And so across the United States, so the Chickasaw, I believe they have like 5 or I think 5 regions, and you vote. If you live in Arizona, you still have you still have a voice. And, I think this brings up the idea that all these things that we're sharing here are things that can happen in any community. We are different because we're sovereign nations. We have a nation-to-nation relationship with the US government, but these are things that still hold true in no matter what the community is. And so giving voice to those people who come and go from the community even. I here in this little town, there are people who go to college or move away, but they come home still. And how do we include their voice? And so I think that's something that's very important to bring up as well. I think where I'm curious, because many of you have brought up the idea of ancestors, and past, present, and future. Tell me a little bit more what it means to be a good ancestor. What does it mean to be a good ancestor? And how might this, how it is for you in your own tribal way, but how might someone who has been pulled away from their indigenous roots, or maybe their traditional ways of doing things? I always like to tell people we were all indigenous at one time. We've just many have stepped away, or have, it's changed. And but what does that look like for you culturally? But then how could you help others to understand what it means to be a good ancestor in their communities?
So I brought up one point, is to make your decision so you're caring for those future generations. So if we're doing that today and we don't do something that's going to ruin the water, we fought against fracking here and we actually were able to help stop it. So, and we were, just a part of all the effort, but we were able to stop the fracking. And here in New York, we have a lot of good fresh water. So you don't want to mess with that. And we try to make that very clear. And of course, I went out and did lots of lectures about it. But that's an example, that you watch out for the next generations ahead. The fact that somebody wants to hand you money doesn't matter when it comes to that. We can still survive if we have water. Yeah. Okay. So.
Maybe I'll jump in. Yeah. I think the part of it for me is being on someone else's territory as well. So I'm on Lekwungen and Wasanich territory. And so how do I be a good ancestor from afar? And it comes down to really, I have a 17-year-old daughter, but really showing her, what it means to connect to your land and to your culture and to your community. And so, honoring the the green corn and other, ceremonies that we go back for, each year, shows her, that return home is such an important journey that you were speaking about, Stephanie, like that place is still there for her. And I tell her, I'll say, you'll never be homeless. And in the sense that you always have a home to go back to. And so you always have a place that you can return to, because that's the place that's where your birth cord is buried. That's where your family is from, and that's where your ancestry is. So yeah, being a good ancestor, I think, as Freida, said, is really thinking ahead. And if, a tangible example that I think of, and I really am inspired by, Leroy Little Bear, who's from Blackfeet Nation. And he, along with Blackfeet elders, developed what they call a Buffalo Treaty. And so it's a treaty between the Blackfeet Nation and the Buffalo. And they basically said, the youth don't have any experience with buffalo. They're singing the songs, they're doing the dances, but they don't have buffalo. And so the treaty was to really honor that sacred relationship. And that treaty is to be held in perpetuity, right? That's going to continue on long after, some of the architects of that treaty are gone. And so those kinds of actions, to me, are really just, they embody what it means to be a good ancestor.
I'd like to bring up stuff that's going on now that I have opinions about, that I think would be good to bring up. And it comes from listening to the radio, the NPR radio, about a week and a half ago. And there was, they spoke about, in order to have all the cars be electric, they're going to need lithium, and also nickel. And then they said nickel from the South American rainforest, and lithium is from South Carolina, I think it is, one of the Carolinas, and also out west. And of course, it's on native land. So my brain went right to that destruction. Oh my God, do we really want to see this again? And we all know is that there's money involved, they'll do it anyway. Okay, so that was very frightening to me. So what came to me was very early on in the life of Syracuse, New York, which is the city near Onondaga Nation. There used to be a trolley system, which was electric. And basically anywhere in the city, you could jump a trolley and go somewhere else, but also end up on the railroad, where you could also end up in Buffalo or New York City, whatever. And to me, it makes sense that maybe that's the way to go with this electric idea, and expend less of the nickel, less of the lithium, and destroy less. Of course, the idea of not destroying isn't in people's brains. It's not there, of preserving and of treating Mother Earth better and treating the people better. Because already in South America, those poor people who live in the rainforests are being run over, just like it happened way back in colonial times with us. So, all right. Anyway, I thought I would share that idea because I think it's a good idea. At least it would cause less, hopefully less damage in the long run. And then Syracuse could be an example to the other cities. But of course, I haven't been able to talk to anyone in Syracuse about this, but it's an idea that came to me.
And one I'm sure they would value, or someone would, I know. And now is the time. Does you want to add anything to this?
I would, because I was listening to the Red Nation podcast, and there was something called "Now is not the time for fear," and I was thinking about what that means to be doing this work, and I'm just one of those people. We all know the people who can talk forever and they have no problem doing that. And then there's the quiet ones, and like, who am I to do that? And you spoke to some of you about not being necessarily in your homelands, and then some of the pain of that too. But I was thinking about what this young woman was saying, as Pueblo women on the podcast. That really, the thing that really strengthens my resolve to do the work, to talk when I really am not that comfortable talking, is really what the expectation of my ancestors are for me. And that is the charge that I have. And so what I have to do with that, to remember to be a good ancestor, is to, continue to learn about what brought us here, all the different movements, so that rigor of study is required. I think ongoing rigor in study. And then also to remember where you come from. And I'm sure everybody here and our audience too, you're standing on the shoulders of people who came before you, who did this work. And you're alive because they did that work. But I also think in terms of the people who, they got mowed over in all of this. Yes, I stand on the shoulders of the ancestors and the kupuna, the elders, and all the teachers, the kumu that I've had. But I also think, and always remember, and we've talked about them, looking at my family, the drug addicts, the abused people, the abusers. There's no accident that we're also dealing with those kinds of issues in our communities. And to be a good ancestor, like we were saying, is to remember and to care for all of those community members as well. And take care of our own healing. And you know what? Forget about having a perfect offering. Just show up and do the work and know that you do that together with people in community and you don't have to do that alone. So that's what I would add to that.
I'm glad she brought up healing, because I think Native people all over have had to heal. And I think many of us know the process because we've had to heal. And I think it's a message that we can share with the world. How many people go through out there in the cities, wherever, and don't have an idea about something that happened to them when they were 5 or 6 is affecting you today. And they don't have an idea that there is an actual process to start you in, to help you work through those emotions, those feelings that you've stuffed, perhaps, that you haven't even looked at because you pushed it away. So I think we have a lot to share with the world in terms of healing. And I like to call it healing for peace, because the way some of us have been treated in the past, and some of us what we've gone through because of boarding school or whatever, we can carry a lot of anger, which can get in the way of taking care of ourselves. You know, a lot of that drinking and drugging or whatever is because of the damage that they carry, and they're not able to handle it well. And just the knowledge that you can get beyond that, get beyond and recover to a place where you're holding a good mind. I know there's Cherokees use that word, those words, good mind. Our word for that is gatnigohio. Anyway, so that you can get to a place where you're healing and also carrying peace again, and able to take care of yourself, but be a loving and caring, peaceful person to help others. Yeah.
Thank you, Freida and Miki'ala, for bringing that up, the healing component. I'll share something from my experience when we were when I was really getting into systems work and understanding. I worked at Thunder Valley CDC in Pine Ridge, and what I learned was that through I think there's 2,080 hours, work hours in a year. And when I did the math and I really looked at how much time we were spending working, I realized that a third of my time was just spent supporting and helping my relatives in my workplace, just being there for each other, because trauma is such a large part of our existence. And that two things came out of that. One was HR practices need to change. And two, we live in two different worlds. We live in a world, a professional world, and we live in our personal world. And I say, because the HR systems are so structured legally, they bind us to a colonized viewpoint of working. And therefore, it's hard to bring ourselves into that space in a cultural way, in an indigenous way, and in a Lakota way. And so what we do at work not always coincided with who we were at home. And there's a merging that needs to happen there. And I have seen that in systems change agents who are out there doing this work. They're changing the way we hold people in organizations and in entities, because there's some of us who have, our families have been so broken, we find family at work. And so we need to be relatives to them, and we need to help them heal when they may not be able to get that anywhere else. Organizations need to be more responsible for that. It was one of my biggest learnings. And so I'm huge on whoever's doing HR work out there, whoever's doing policy work. There's so much that needs to change. And the recognition that, And also, if you're working within your communities, you can double down on that, because we're not only trying to change and keep positive and hold our relatives and hold everything that we value, but on top of it, we're carrying our own stuff, and it's laborious. And so we need to cut some slack in this, 2 weeks of vacation. Forget it. It's ridiculous. And you all agree. So that's one thing I think in systems change that needs to happen. We need to recognize us as humans, not as a peg in a wheel. So what else can we do? This is the last question. What else can you share with everyone? And the question was, what can we do? How can we go beyond land acknowledgements? I mean, we're all at the place where like land acknowledgements that's great. We've been there. We've gotten that for years. What can we give those on this call today? What can we give them as something to take from what we know and what we've experienced, that they can take into their daily lives tomorrow, or they can consider when they're thinking about new ways of doing things from an Indigenous perspective? It's a big question. Just come from your heart. It's always difficult. I know we're often called to give of ourselves and our hearts, and that's can be a tough ask sometimes. So just whatever comes to your heart.
What comes to me is there's a book by John Mohawk called Thinking Indian. Okay. And there's a chapter in the back, and he did this in 2009, this article, this chapter, and it was about lying in America. Lying, lying. And I think it really hit home at the time, because there was some serious stuff going on about that in the world. And this is one of those things you run into when you go from, your nation out into the world. Suddenly it's not okay to say, oh, look, my child's sick, I'm going to be late. Suddenly they won't accept it. Or, there's places where they just won't hear it. And what I've done in the past where I've worked is I do a lot of teaching. So they have an idea of what to expect and start valuing me and understanding me. So after a while, if I needed time, I could trade with somebody to stretch a time I need. And that helped a lot. I also worked in places where I had time to have ceremony, to go to ceremony, because a lot of our ceremonies are in the morning. So as you know, a lot of work is from like 8 to 5. So, and they go, what? Okay, and I also worked in a school. So I helped the school folks, all the administration and the people who work there, have an understanding of our values and have an understanding of who we are, so that they had more respect, because you could keep them out of it and not let them know what you're about when you go to ceremony, just your basics, like we're going to be giving Thanksgiving, and fill them in about that, fill them in about clans, fill them in about our history, so that they can respect us. We expect them to respect us. So what I would do is give the new teachers a tour. And I've done that for a bunch of years. And if I can, I'll get a hold of the new superintendent before he's superintendent, or she, and fill him in about who we are, what our values are, and all that, so that when they start having their time, they can consider us as really who we are rather than something in their head about what we are. Okay, that's enough for now.
Thank you, Freida. I love it. Appreciate it. Jeff?
Beautiful. Thank you, Freida. Yeah, I think I saw someone in the chat say land back, so I'll mention that too. And say that land back and water back are part of that that process of not just returning those lands, but thinking differently about the land and your relationship to the land. That is, for us, it's about governance, it's about relational responsibilities, it's about, you know, caring for those places. It's not about property. And so thinking differently about, you know, the land and thinking differently about the waters, I think an important part of systems change. And I'll you know, part of it too is that, you know, the colonial system has been devastating to Indigenous peoples, and it continues to be. But it hasn't been so great for non-Indigenous peoples either. That is, there is not that health. The planet is not healthy as a result, and very few people are benefiting. The 1%, right, are benefiting. And so really thinking, you know, of how do we move from a competitive based society where we're actually rooting for people to fail, and that failure means your success, to a more cooperative based society where we're actually rooting for people's success in the economy. And, you know, it's more of a compassionate economy. And I think that's something that we've been doing for, you know, like I said earlier, 10,000 or more years. And that's how we've been able to perpetuate our culture and our connections to these places, because of that approach to an economy. And yeah, I'll close with this idea that the late Benny Smith, who's a Cherokee elder, told me about Cherokee leadership, because I think everyone has this ability to engage in leadership. And for him, Cherokee leadership started with the individual, and you have a dream or a vision, and then you have to act on that dream or vision. So it might be language revitalization, it might be, you know, reconnecting with your family, and then you have to make it, and this is where we fail oftentimes in the academy or institutions, you have to make it relatable to other people. And so that relatability is, you know, you have to show how this is important, and then you mobilize people for change, right? So it starts with an individual's actions and it leads to change, versus saying, hey, everyone, let's just gather together and let's push for some change, right? There has to be something rooted to values. There has to be something rooted in your everyday actions in order for it to really take hold.
I don't know how much time we have, but I'm going to jump right in there on this idea. You know, and I'm looking at things from the side, and this is my own opinion, okay? So I'll take credit for it and whatever comes with that. The system of electing people is too involved with money. I'm sure everybody agrees with me. I don't know if you've gotten 5,000 emails about send money, please, and you're sending money to Kansas, or you're sending money to Georgia, or you're sending money to Florida. It was never supposed to be like that. Those representatives are for that area. You know, I don't know. So that, you know, that is upsetting, but unfortunately, it would be very hard to change this, because who's in the Congress and the House of Representatives? Super rich people. And will they change that? I think it would be great if those people running for office, the feds could give them so much money to have time to tell what they're about, what their ideas are about. Maybe 3 times throughout the time that they're running for office. A certain amount of money, not like this piles and piles and piles of money, and that's what matters. And also, because Abraham Lincoln would not be elected today. I mean, it seems silly to say that, but he would not be elected today because he is not a rich person and he wasn't from a place where he could find a lot of money. So it's unfortunate that money happens to be the big thing that runs everything. Likewise, those who are very, very rich are in office, and they're going to gear their decisions about that. It'd be very hard to have them think about the 7 generations ahead. It'd be very hard to get them to consider the little guy, that old 1% thing. So anyway, I said it. I'm glad I did. Okay.
Thank you, Freida. Miki'ala, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I've already heard Len back, and I think if you haven't already seen some of the examples of honor tax, and some of that kind of work is also going on in places like Wiyot territory and other places. But and then there's supporting Indigenous communities in the work that we do, access to land, just for gathering without being harassed, some of those kinds of things. But really, ultimately, I think some of the things that we could do beyond land acknowledgement is thought partnership, and not just thought partnership by including Indigenous peoples at the table, but having us set the table for you, with you, is pretty central, I believe. And I think that those go a lot further than trying to say, hey, we got this idea, what do you think? You don't care about what I think. If you ask me, then you got to ask me in the very beginning, and I gotta be organizing it with you. So those are some of the things that people can do to go beyond land acknowledgement. And folks have been talking about so many things, and I just wanted to say too, this came to my mind and is on my heart. Like, somebody said there's a lot of rage or anger, and I think I've thought about this for a lot of times now. That pain is rage, that's pain, but that rage, that fury, is fuel. And if I were to metabolize that rage and that fury, I would distill that down to aloha. I would distill that down to love. And that all of the actions that we take, it's really based on aloha for our community, for creation, for our families, for ourselves, and for those we work with to do this work, and applying it to the place where we are, whether we're living in our territories or living in someone else's territories. My responsibility, my kuleana, is the same. My ancestors would expect me to be taking care of the place where I am. And so wherever you are, I think that would bode well for you to be thinking in terms of that, and the work that you do, and where you do it, and with who you do it with.
Wow, that's powerful for us to leave off, to sort of end our questions and such. Thank you so much, Miki'ala, because that's like, you're giving us a lot to think about there, and just in that little special bubble, but powerful bubble of our emotions and where we go with those. We're going to open it up. Does anyone have questions, comments? We've been looking at the chat. There's a lot of good comments and responses back. Does anyone have questions? Let's start with that. How about questions? Joe, is it possible to open up the screen so we can all see each other? Let me see.
That's how it looks to me. If you go to the top, maybe a view, and do gallery, you should be
There
able
we
to see
go.
everybody. Yeah.
Sorry. Okay.
You could make us smaller.
How
Not
about
real.
questions or comments? Anyone?
Hi, I actually had one.
Yeah.
Let me-
Shanda?
yes. Let me turn on my video here. Sorry, I'm a little. I don't think it's actually working, but so I had two questions. One that might be more difficult to answer than the other, but I do like a lot of just like environmental restoration work kind of at home, just like planting native plants and removing invasive species. And um, I basically wanted to ask like how I could do that in a way that is, you kind of talked about, like land back being like caring for like the waters and the lands. Um, and but I don't come from an indigenous background myself. I like come from like essentially the like priestly caste of Hinduism in India. And I've been struggling to find my actual indigenous ancestral roots, but I just have not really been able to. And I think this is also just like a place that a lot of, immigrants to the country find themselves in, where we like really identify with the indigenous cause and struggle and, kind of support those movements, but kind of lack that identity for ourselves in terms of like where do I belong, like where, how do I, am I just doing this just in name and not in real purpose. And I've been trying to figure out how to like kind of create like a real like land-based identity for myself, and kind of bring that into the work that I do. So yeah, I think my just general question is like, how is someone who has a background that is non-indigenous and it doesn't seem, like it's difficult to really identify one, how do we maybe come into our own sense of indigeneity and work with those who are indigenous to the lands that we live on in a way that is like meaningful and respectful? And yeah, I guess that's my question.
Frida, you want to answer that?
To some extent, everywhere I've gone, and I've traveled all over the States and part of Canada, I haven't gone very far beyond that. But when I meet Indigenous people, we share values. We share values, so we connect right away. So this caring about Mother Earth, being thankful for all the parts of creation, that's something that's real. I mean, it's something that's a part of Indigenous people. So your people, wherever they are, even though you haven't found them yet, they carried that as well in their past. These are values that were given to all the people on Earth. The fact that some have forgotten, we're reminding you that you, as you go about Mother Earth and whatever you're doing, you can consider those parts of creation and consider be kind, loving, and good to not only those parts of creation, but other people. And then you can also respect those parts of creation and also respect people. So those are values from Indigenous people pretty much everywhere you go. And we all have a way of giving thanks. So unfortunately, you haven't found your original way to give thanks, but there's no reason why you can't now, because Thanksgiving is a very real human expression. And it doesn't mean you're worshiping anything. I know some people get all nervous about that. It means you're giving thanks to those parts of creation that are living and here on earth and helping us. We're lucky they're here. So we give thanks to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe I'll jump in for part of that too. The restoration part. I thought, yeah, I think what Frida said is so important, and thinking about having that that connection that transcends community. The restoration is another part of it, is really localizing your relationships. That is, understanding which nations are hosting you on the territory, and at some point establishing a relationship with them so that you can take their lead in terms of what it might look like to remove invasives to help restore some of the ecosystems. And that's something that's happened here from a woman from Songhees, Cheryl Bryce, created a Lekwungen community tool shed, and it's Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks that get together and pull invasives at on parklands, on private property, on reserve lands. And really I view it as kind of my responsibility here is to help with that effort to really rejuvenate the food systems of this area. So I think finding ways to support the local work that's being done, or if it's not being done, finding ways that you can engage in a relationship that is going to maybe give a greater understanding of what you can do in the future, and really lending your talents to that effort.
Thank you. I want to add something too. You know, you're on a journey. You're on a journey to discover, and it's a very personal path, and one that is circular. It's not linear. It's not one day I'll belong, or we have to, that's the colonized perspective of belonging. And it's belonging, you already belong. How that shows up, what it looks like, the how is what you're seeking. But and I think, there are many ancient spiritualities that would say that it's a path. So from an emotional and a social perspective, I find often in my coaching work that people just need permission, and it's like permission granted that you are on a journey, and that you belong, and now it's just for you to experience how, like your cat, he's on a journey.
Right.
Thank you for that question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Miki'ala, you want to add something?
I was just gonna say, like lots of people might have said, "Hey, you should take the invasives off your property" or something like that. But you actually listened and you're doing those things. So I would say that you're already walking it. And I think it's our duty as human beings to like return to some of those original teachings. And if you don't know, then to go figure it out and see who you can talk to. And I remember this story a friend was sharing with me, how an Indigenous person was talking to him and telling him, "Hey, when I tell you that the trees speak to you, it's not a metaphor." And my friend was like, it made him cry, because he's like, I've never heard the trees talk to me. And his Indigenous really mentor said, "Well, you better go out there and listen." And I bet, if you ask them, it's like the permission to like just put yourself out there. Show this to me because I am now ready to learn a little bit about who I am. Then the ancestors are waiting for us to ask. And they've put those prayers down for us to pick up. So I just that's what I think about that.
Thank you. So many powerful answers to that question. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anybody else with questions, comments, things you want to share? And so it is. Yes. Well, wait, is there a question in the comments? Yeah, do people have further general learning resources to share? I can share a couple podcasts. Yeah. Yeah, there's some really good podcasts out there. Oh, I forget the one. It's the women. I'll get it to Joe and we can share that out. Yeah, and I know everybody was really into Braiding Sweetgrass, the book, a few years back.
Yes.
Excellent book. And the Native Writers coming out is just, it's astronomical. It's so exciting. There's so many books out. So I think, yeah, Joe, I think we're winding down, and if anybody has any last minute questions, they can jump in. Otherwise, it's been a pleasure, and I've gotten so much learning out of this, being with the three of you and feeling your energy and your love and what you've shared with everyone. So I am very appreciative. Thank you so much. So
Thank you, Stephanie, and thanks also to Freida and Jeff and Miki'ala, and to everyone else for joining us. If there are resources people would like to share, please email them to me or tweet them at us, and we will make sure we put them out through the Democracy Collaborative channels, and we'll be distributing this recording. But I think this has been a powerful, beautiful, and grounding conversation that really puts us in touch with what's important as we go about the work of trying to build a better world for everybody. And it's a new one in Miki'ala's sense of having a K at the beginning, not a new one with an N. So rediscovery and the new ancestors that we all need were real themes here today. So thank you all, and thank you so much, Stephanie, for being such a wonderful host. Have a good day, everybody. Go well, be well.
Aloha.
You.
You're welcome, everyone. Thank you.